Leaders and workers alike used the occasion of the May Day to remind the government on the need to continue with policies that will reduce economic hardship of the masses.
This May Day rally to appeal to the President of the country to address this fuel scarcity issue.
They should do what they can do, like being involved in partnership with other countries to open up the transport industry without loss of jobs.
Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Winifred Oyo-Ita, has commended Nigerian workers for their resilience and contributions to the development of the nation. Mrs. Oyo-Ita spoke to correspondent Adebola Brooklyn Sunday after some workers disrupted the May Day celebration and even refused to be pacified by their leaders.
The welfare of the workers is very paramount to this administration, and I'm sure the workers are aware that His Excellency Mr. President has approved the MOU between the Nigerian Mortgage Refinancing Company and the Federal Government Staff Housing Loans Board to facilitate more funds for workers under the Federal Integrated Staff Housing Program.
Some workers stated their challenges and expressed dissatisfaction with the conduct of some of their colleagues.
Bail out to states, governors to pay arrears of salary. They didn't even pay that one. Some states are still owing now.
The president of the NLC, the president of the TUC are all around, and they have a catalogue of issues that they have been presenting and which they are going to highlight today. So disrupting a day that is supposed to be the day of fun for workers around the country, I think is very uncalled for. It is unfortunate.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Labour and Employment, Senator Chris Ngige, has assured Nigerian workers of government's commitment to ensure that they are adequately remunerated and their welfare enhanced. The Labour Minister was on NTA's Network News speaking on labour and the plight of Nigerian workers as they mark the 2017 Workers' Day.
We as the executive, we are going to initiate, and we have initiated already. The labour bodies, the federations have been involved in all the negotiation. We have put up a technical committee. The technical committee have brought out a framework. The framework encompasses everybody that is an employer. The government, and when we say government, we mean federal government and state governments. So you must get governors involved. The employers of labor in the private sector, represented by NECA, National Employment Consultative Assembly, NECA, and then NASIMA, and then MAN, Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, and then Association of Small and Medium Enterprises in the country. So we got to get them under one roof to discuss, because that is what the ILO law says, collective bargaining. So the labor people, the labor unions, their leaders know we are on the right track.
Well, in other news, the Deputy National Women Leader of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Tina Ekweme Adike, says the 2 years in office of the Buhari administration has been one that has delivered on the core mandate promised the people. This was at the unveiling of the Servant Leader magazine, which focused on 2 years of good governance in Nigeria.
Muhammad Buhari is on the right track, and we Nigerians should give him the right support to make sure he delivers the goods which we voted for him in 2015.
Buhari has done well. My prayer is that God will keep him.
The Police Officers Association, POA, has taken immunization to the barracks to counter the scourge of meningitis ravaging many states across the country. National President of POA charged that all police family members make it a point of duty to get vaccinated.
We should try and keep a very airy environment. They should also go to other health centers to get the vaccine if they are not able to get it now. It is very, very important for each member of the police family to get vaccinated.
Well, that's it for now on the news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Cliff and Kingsley after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Everyday air. Ordinary air. And then there's TomTom Air. There's air, and then there's TomTom Air. What are you breathing? New TomTom 5-piece pack.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria, where focus will center on fallouts from the World Bank Group IMF spring meetings in Washington, D.C. But before then, we'll talk business now, and the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, assures that the economy is moving out of recession soon, and financial experts are optimistic and have advised on ways to stay out of recession in the future. Details with Kolo Mohammed on Business News.
Thank you and a warm welcome to Business News. Nigeria's Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele says with the current efforts by the federal government aimed at reviving the economy, the nation will be out of recession soon. Against this backdrop, financial experts have listed indices to look out for as pointers to an economy moving out of recession.
The most important is the purchasing power of every Nigerian, value of the naira. Value of the naira is our life in Nigeria. The more the naira depreciates, the more our collective lives depreciate. So the value of the naira must be pinned, and in the foreseeable future must remain stable.
The Central Bank of Nigeria assures of its continued forex intervention to achieve its target of foreign exchange convergence at both the interbank and the parallel market. That's Business News at this hour.
All right, thank you very much there, Kolo Mohammed, for the Business News. Son, Good Morning Nigeria. Up next for us now, we shall be taking a look at the headlines and some of the front pages of the papers that we have this morning.
What is trending in national papers today? We have Bayo Atoyobi to review the newspapers. It's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Cliff. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, Kingsley.
Bayo, yes, I'd like to have you, but as can be expected, you can see the stories on the front pages of most of the papers arising from the various rallies that took place in different parts of the country and also elsewhere around the world, the May Day rallies. Let's begin with This Day newspaper. This Day newspaper has it, angry workers protest as Oshomole explains tough economic conditions. That's the lead story for This Day newspaper. The story, of course, the headline is immediately below the photograph that we have there on the front page. But you have a number of writers to that headline. Former Edo governor explains APC-led federal government pro-poor and Labour demands implementation of new minimum wage. Saraki Dogara and Ngige leave Abuja rally. Saraki Senate President Dogara, Speaker of the House, and Ngige Labour Minister. And federal government to set up minimum wage committee. That's the last rider to that headline. Now moving up again, we have other headlines right there. We say that that's above the nameplate now. Federal government resumes payment into excess crude account with $84 million. The details of that story can be found on page 9. And above that is a story on the economy as well. It says, despite recession, banking sector loans to customers rise to 16.372 trillion naira, with industry profit after tax rising to 452 billion naira. And banks bar power discos over bad debts. And then there's a piece also there beside the photograph you have there on the front page. It says, Adeniyi clarifies encounter with Jonathan. Of course, that has to do with the new book that's just been released against the run of play being on the outcome of the 2015 presidential election. Cliff?
Yeah, still on other papers, we look at New Telegraph. And New Telegraph this morning has on the front page, May Day workers revolt. A whole lot of issues there. Prevent Minister from delivering Buhari's address. Saraki Dogara flees state bus and unions infiltrated, says federal government. And NLC demands new minimum wage. Governors using heirs as conduits. And President assures workers on new national minimum wage. And of course, we have on top of the nameplate, recession crashes Nigeria's internet subscribers to 89.9 million. And telecoms lose 7 million users. We also see the picture stories of the May Day of workers. And also moving on, we go to The Punch. On The Punch this morning, it still centers on the Workers' Day developments. We have the minimum wage. Man CSOs disagree as workers disrupt Abuja May Day rally. We have other riders there, and we see pictures of workers on that May Day. We have also that the banks blamed Nigeria's forest crisis on new foreign exchange regime. And at the bottom of The Punch this morning have a prophet arrested for collecting 70 million naira, 3 houses to cure fibroids. And 3 soldiers, 15 militants killed in Ondo Creek's gunfire. With details of that report on page 16 of The Punch today. Another story on worker on Daily Trust is Buhari asks workers to join whistleblowers. I think we would like to get your comments on the developments before we go to other issues.
Yes, President Muhammadu Buhari has promised that a new minimum wage committee will to provide the needed palliative from the discomfort of the workers on the economy and recession in the making. And it said government will give expeditious consideration to the proposal of the technical committee report. Meanwhile, the May Day rally was disrupted for workers were worried and were demanding a position of the national minimum wage. Workers objected to the permanent secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment, to reading the address by the Minister of Labour. The explanation by Ayubawa, Labour leader, that the minister who was to represent the president couldn't possibly read his own address fell on deaf ears. Even when the minister mounted the podium, the chant was we need a new minimum wage now. However, labor leaders, the NLC and TUC, as well as former labor leader, former governor of Edo State, tried to calm the frayed-nails, but they had less success. Ayuba Waba, in his message, urged the federal government to immediately constitute a tripartite committee to negotiate the new minimum wage. He said, 56,000 naira new minimum wage sent to government in May 2015 is most effective weapon against the fight of corruption, particularly in the public service. Balaka Igama of the Trade Union Congress also said workers are pained and showed their anger at the rally. He said workers promoted since 2007 have not been paid promotion areas, so much so that somebody promoted to the position of director, another assistant director, is still earning salary on grade level 9 and grade level 10. Meanwhile, there have been some perspective on the 56,000 minimum wage. Civil society organizations, 2 of them, are in support of the 56,000 minimum wage as the only way that can take the least worker home. However, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, as well as Abuja Chamber of Commerce, say the 56,000 naira minimum wage is unrealistic and the manufacturers and employers cannot sustain it. So that is the different strokes from the May Day of yesterday.
All right, Bayo, let's go over now to the Leadership newspaper to check out the headlines of the Leadership newspaper. Now, the lead story for the Leadership newspaper says OBJ, IBB, and Abdulsalami meet in Mina. OBJ, of course, these are former Nigerian heads of state. OBJ's President Obasanjo, IBB, Ibrahim Babangida, and Abdulsalami, the last military leader before the handover in 1999. Meeting in Mina and hold closed-door session for over 2 hours. And another writer to that story says political manipulators causing confusion with president's health. That's according to Chief BC Akonde. Details of the story can be found on page 5 of the Leadership newspaper. Now, just below the nameplate of Leadership newspaper again, we have another story on the economy. It says CBN loans to banks dropped by 6% to 1.8 trillion naira. And then NCAA tightens surveillance and suspends crew member over marijuana. Details of that story are on page 28. Now, below the lead story, of course, you have a photograph there from the May Day rally that took place in Abuja yesterday. A photograph of some of the dignitaries who were present, of course, before they eventually left the venue. Now, Electoral Act Amendment, funding and supremacy divide political parties. Details are on page 12, and we will expedite action on new minimum wage. That again is attributed to President Buhari. The story starts on the front page and jumps to page 5. Cliff.
Yeah, moving on now, we'll go to Daily Trust, and on the front page of Daily Trust, the special report there centers on public water samples show harmful germs. Public water samples show harmful germs, and we'll have a graphics illustration to support that very report. And you have more details on page 6 of Daily Trust this morning. And we earlier read Buhari as workers to join whistleblowers there. And moving on, if you go to inside page on page 13, we have Oyo spends 100% of FARC on workers' salary, SSG. That's one of the reports inside Daily Trust this morning. And we'll have on let's get your comments on the 2 stories.
Yes, quickly about the water story. The Daily Trust has raised an alarm that water samples in Abuja, Lagos, and Kaduna tend to contain germs that are injurious to human health. The paper says its independently investigated investigation showed the presence of microorganisms that exceed the maximum level accepted by the World Health Organization. And it says the samples were taken at a location in Abuja, and it showed that the threshold was 20, what they call thermotolerant coliform, instead of 0 standard, which the World Health Organization expects. At Lagos, he said water was found to be acidic and had coliform and Escherichia coli germs. At Kaduna, the samples were taken at Kakuri, and they found that it was totally unsafe for human condition. However, those found at Kano, Katsina, were said to be safe, so also were the water they sampled in Enugu and Jos. Failure, they say, is an orphan, while success has many fathers. Ogun State government is to honor the brand new world heavy champion of the world, Anthony Joshua. The 2012 London Olympic gold medalist was born of Nigerian parents from Shagamu. And the Commissioner of Youth and Sport for Ogun State, Afolabi Afuyade, says, Anthony Johnson has made us proud as our son, and the state plans to honor him. In fact, the majority leader is to move a motion in the State of Assembly suggesting that the Shagamu Stadium should be named Anthony Joshua Stadium.
All right, Bayo, that's very interesting. Always, you know, we celebrate success, but the major challenge for us is to work towards that success. Yes. You know, when Anthony Joshua was sweating it out in the gym, nobody was there. You know, now that he's taking down Klitschko in the 11th round, everybody say, "Oh yeah, we're claiming him." He's one of us.
Even when he showed interest, you know, to represent Nigeria at the Olympics, I understand that he was not given.
Of course, that's typical. You know, with our sports administration, we have seen that. Bayo discussed this yesterday. Francis Obiekwelu and the number of other Nigerians, you know, who had to pick up the colors of other countries, you know, simply because they were frustrated. We don't have usually the enabling environment.
And another player is showing interest in Nigeria, Ola Aino, you know, who in fact wrote the NFF, you know, indicating interest to represent Nigeria. I know he plays for Chelsea and has played not less than 5 matches in this season. Well, just look at other developments in sports, yes. Since we're talking about sports now, yes. Because the big thing is the Champions League. The Champions League will take place today. Real Madrid, Atletico, and whatever. It's all on the promotions there. Owen tips Real Madrid on Daily Trust sports page. Back page there we have Owen tips Real Madrid to beat Atletico, win Champions League. And our own Joshua is still there. Role model Joshua can match Wool's effect. And all that we have, Graham makes history, wins that. But we have more interest in what concerns Nigeria here.
Yes,
so
talking about what concerns Nigeria.
Our own Ihanacho, you know, is to move to Bayern Munich, you know, if Deportivo agrees to agrees to exchange with Maga and all that. So what do you have to say here? Well,
you see, the state that the league is now is going towards the end, particularly the Premier League. And the tendency is that players will begin to look for greener pastures or where they can be very useful. Iheanacho is quite a potential. He's young, but each time he seems not to get playing time, but the least opportunity he has had, he has produced goals for Manchester United. The same thing will be in Arsenal. But the challenge is if you leave a current team, are you sure?
To Borussia Dortmund.
Yes, you'll be getting a playing time at the next play where you are going. I'm talking about the concern about the attitude of Nigerian sports administrators. I will advise future Nigerian sports who want to represent the country to adopt the strategy of Samuel Okwaraji. He paid his way, came and went to the Eagles camp and competed for the shirt, and the coach found him useful and he picked him up. So that is the challenge. You go there, assert your quality, and your quality will speak for you.
What's happening in our own league?
Well, no, I don't have any information on that at the moment.
with Rangers, you know, still at the bottom there.
Rangers have tried. I mean, they've remained in the top league, you know, since the introduction of the league system in 1979. That's to be commended. Shooting Stars and Bendel Insurance, as they used to be called. I mean, they've since, you know,
it appears it's a time to go down now.
No, but is it far-fetched? Which team won the Premier League last year?
They did, but
I'm talking about the Premier League last year. It's Leicester. All right, where did they find themselves? They are gradually now coming up gradually. So maybe the Rangers was taken by the fury that they won the championship last year, and now they have had to fight their way back because they become the target of everything.
That's right. But just to move back again to a story that we discussed yesterday, that's on the statement issued by former Minister of External Affairs, Professor Bolaji Akiemi.
Yes.
We don't have a story on the front pages of the papers that we have this morning, but the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Ayoko, has also issued a statement lending support to the call by Professor Bolaji Akinyemi yesterday, indicating that the probe of the NIA, that's Nigeria's External Secret Service, has to be treated with a great deal of caution.
Yes, he said he's
not to sweep things under the carpet, but what to disclose and what not to disclose, other than your decisions.
Chief Emeka Yoko categorically said he is not fond of issuing press statement, but when he saw the pronouncement by Professor Bolaji Akinyemi in London, he felt it a duty bound to lend his voice. And he said that it is common practice by responsible government for only head of government and very few appropriate ministers to be involved in the operation of the nation's external security services. Therefore, such information, according to him, should not be made public because it portends grave danger for Nigeria's international relations and security.
So, reach your conclusions, and then, of course, take out whatever punishment there is, if there's anyone like.
Yes.
All right, that's the much that we can take. Cliff, I'm not sure you have any other people.
No, I think we're done with the papers this morning.
So that's the much we can take here in this newspaper review segment. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing the outcome of this year's IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C. and implications for Nigeria.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let the change begin from within. Look at you, oh Gerola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Cadbury Bournvita now comes in an attractive new 500-gram refill pack. Simply open and reseal after use to retain the chocolatey and creamy taste. Cadbury Bournvita. Prepare to win.
From the south-south to the northeast, southeast to the northwest, southwest to the north-central, the Future Assured project and its component, Get Involved, is restoring hope to millions of Nigerian women and children.
We are actually doing a lot under Future Assured, the program of Her Excellency Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari. And I believe what we are doing so far is impacting positively on the lives of women and children in Nigeria, particularly those in the internally displaced camps across the nation.
Get Involved supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
You are on Good Morning Nigeria on NTA, and the focus today is on the fallout from the spring meetings of the World Bank Group and IMF, which was held in Washington, D.C., and is a meltpot of discussions on global and regional issues of interest. And of interest today is to look at how it affects Nigeria and, in fact, Africa. And correspondent Leah Katumbabatunde will set the tone with this background report.
Spring meetings of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund IMF each year brings together central bankers, ministers of finance and development, private sector executives and academics to discuss issues of global concern, including the world economic outlook, poverty eradication, economic development and aid effectiveness. Also featured this year seminars, regional briefings, press conferences and many other events focused on the global economy, international development and the world's financial system. For the World Bank, countries that have fiscal space need to continue with structural reforms. This is vital to accelerating the sustainable and inclusive economic growth needed to end extreme poverty by 2030 as conflict, climate shocks, the worst refugee crisis since World War II, and famine in parts of East Africa and Yemen, which the UN has called the worst in 70 years, continue to take toll on economies around the world.
We're using this meeting to bring all of the leaders together to come up with a new plan. I mean, we're going to put on the table.
The International Monetary Fund had pretty much the same target as before, to push for more consolidation and stronger monetary policies in nations so as to free up more resources for development.
All countries, of course, should guard against what I have called the self-inflicted wounds, such as restrictions, subsidies, and other trade distortions that reduce competition and economic openness.
Sub-Saharan Africa was identified to remain a frontier for growth and seemingly boundless potential. But the region currently faces a broad-based slowdown that has resulted in negative per capita income growth for the first time in 20 years. This high-level panel of policymakers and entrepreneurs discussed the challenges facing the region and the policies required to restore vigorous growth. Top on the identified challenges to growth in the region include drought, activities of terrorists around the Lake Chad Basin, as well as slow trade.
Getting that shift to greater export emphasis is what's really important.
Growth momentum in sub-Saharan Africa has remained fragile. Only 1.5% in 2016, its weakest outcome in more than 2 decades and below the rate of population growth. The International Monetary Fund stated that a slowdown has affected about 2/3 of countries that account for more than 4/5 of the regional GDP. For Nigeria, the delegation was led by the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun. The fiscal and monetary teams held several meetings with the multilaterals and other stakeholders bordering on tax reforms, infrastructure development, especially power and housing, debt recoveries, stabilizing the local currency, financial inclusion, the actualization of the economic recovery and growth plan, social intervention, fight against corruption, public service reforms, and improving trade relations with other partners. The gates were then thrown open for investors to come into the critical sector of the economy, and the minister assures it will materialize soon, given the desire of government to return the country to growth trajectory. Good Morning Nigeria today seeks to identify gains and impacts of these on the Nigerian economy.
All right, thank you very much there, Leah Katung Babatunde, our correspondent, of course, who was in D.C. for the spring meeting. Now we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as at remote locations to join in further discussion of matters arising from the conclusions of the meeting. First, we'd like to welcome a regular face on Good Morning Nigeria. Professor Kanife is an economist and also a public policy analyst. Professor Kanife, always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then we also have with us here another familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria is Mr. Nana Ude, he's of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Mr. Ude, delighted to have you join us today.
Thank you once again. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
Okay, moving on now, we're going outside the studio straight to Kaduna, where we have Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, who is the Commissioner for Budget and National Planning in Kaduna. And it is our pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
From Kaduna, we go straight to United Kingdom, where we have in London Tunde Lemo, who is a former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And it is indeed our pleasure to have you join us via Skype from London. You're welcome, sir. Moving on now, Kingsley, we have to really...
That's right. I would say let's begin with Mr. Ude, Nana Ude of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Usually, I mean, a conference of this nature, or a meeting of this nature, affords participants an opportunity to have a window, into what the global picture is with regard to either the economic or the financial system. Now let's focus first on the economic system. What is the economic outlook on the basis of the projections or the statements or reviews by the World Bank Group as well as the IMF itself?
Thank you very much. First of all, one thing about meetings like this is that beyond what is being said, the most significant outcomes are what was not said. And even more importantly, the clouds around which the meetings are held. For now, we are living in very uncertain times in the global economic outlook. There are certain contradictions in play. The Brexit, Britain has not completed their negotiations with the European Union, and the role of Britain in the global economy is still unclear as we speak. The election of Trump and what you might see called the rise of economic nationalism is also now beginning to sweep across the world. We are looking forward to the elections in France and Germany. Sure. So these are all the clouds around which it held. And so you find that at a meeting like that, the global economic governance framework is designed to give and to create some bit of stability, to create some bit of certainty, confidence that the economy is moving in the right direction, even if there is turbulence ahead. Some of the data that they put out before the meetings indicated that there are some bit of economic recovery going on. In Africa, there were projections around 0.8% and all of that. But then again, when you talk about Africa, we also have a very unique situation we have now. As we speak, it looks as if there is a lack of economic leadership in Africa. The two big countries of Nigeria and South Africa are currently having some bit of leadership uncertainty, so to say. You find that in South Africa, Jacob Zuma can barely sit down to govern. In Nigeria, we are still in the process of articulating a coherent economic policy that we can take to the world. And so it's around this that those meetings were held. And so, like I said earlier on, the most significant outcomes are the ones that were not said, rather than the ones that were said.
Thank you, Nana. Yeah, I think we'd like to get Professor Kenny to come in here, because this is a melting pot, where we have people of various backgrounds, central bankers, ministers of finance, and all that come to talk, a talk shop, more or less. Looking at all that transpired, the predictions, the economic outlook that were released at that very meeting, what is your takeaway?
I think for this particular meeting, I think you can be proud of the group that represented Nigeria, the economic group, because it came at a time when we just launched our economic recovery and growth plan. So there was something positive to talk about. And then secondly, we're beginning to collapse into a coherent team. And this was lacking for the last 2 years, with all the stakeholders, joining hands. And now that's reinforced by a plan that is absolutely good, in the sense that if we do keep faith with that, then we'll kiss goodbye to the challenges. But having said that, there's no doubt that Africa, there's a sharp divide between what you call the leadership of Africa, the economic leadership of Africa. Of course, we have to include Angola. The resource-rich economies of Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola are really in trouble because of the monolithic type of economy that we have. And then we are returning very poor growth figures. Whereas the likes of Cote d'Ivoire, even Senegal and Zambia, and the East African countries, they're all steaming ahead with well in excess of 5% growth rate. But having said that, they've aggregated the growth rate for Africa at around 2.6%, with us very far behind. Yeah. But that's just the beginning. But there are very good noises and very good comments and charitable comments for Nigeria for what we are doing.
All right, Professor Kanife, thanks a lot. Again, we'll come back to you to discuss details of the issues that you've just touched on. Earlier, we introduced Mr. Tunde Lemo, former Deputy Governor of the CBN, who is also a fairly regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, joining us via Skype from London. Mr. Tunde Lemo, again, let's back up and then have, from your perspective, what the global financial outlook is like. Is the world under any threat of a financial crisis, or is the world stabilizing financially?
The account of Christine Lagarde, the IMF MD, is very clear now that the world is moving out of the doldrum. Post-meltdown of 2008-2009 had meant that growth had been impaired in the past 6 years. But all of that is over now. And then, of course, we are beginning to see growth in the horizon. particularly looking at three main issues. Now, emphasis is on productivity globally, and then, of course, sharing the benefit of productivity, that is, making sure that the growth is inclusive all over the regions. It is expected that in the next few years, 2/3 of the global growth will come from emerging markets and from developing economies, of course, which includes Nigeria. And of course, cross-border cooperation through multilateral framework is also what is expected to drive that growth. So for me, there is light at the horizon, and Nigeria should brace up so that we don't lose out, even as the entire world now depends more on the emerging market and global economy.
There in London, and we'd like to move to Kaduna because the Commissioner for Budget and Planning of Kaduna State, Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, was in Washington, D.C. for the spring meetings. And I know you took part in a number of it. We looked at the multilateral meetings that is directed at ensuring that Africa benefits in the Infrastructure Development Fund and other issues that were raised, primarily the nation's economic recovery and growth plan was something that was pushed by the Minister of Finance. What are your takeaways?
Well, this was really a good outing for Nigeria because, as you may recall, in the 2015 spring meetings, the government had just come through an election, and so the representation was at best a bit sketchy. In 2016, we were going through just the beginnings of a recession. We arrived the World Bank without a coherent strategy. But for this year, we had a very, very good outing because the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, and the entire economic team were in DC to spread sort of the good news coming out of Nigeria with a coherent strategy that lays out a clear 5-year development plan. So we're very interested around these meetings as well, and we're quite happy with the role that Nigeria has played in this World Bank Spring meetings. The next meeting, of course, is the fall meeting, which we'd be also looking very, very deeply at. But I think overall, Nigeria did play a very good part, and we're looking forward to some of the outcomes. Just a final point, this comes out of the IDA replenishment negotiation in 2016, December, where $75 billion has just been approved for developing countries across the world. So there is a lot of opportunity for us to finance our way out of this recession and build infrastructure and provide jobs for our people.
All right, Sani Abdullahi, thanks a lot. Again, we'll come back to you at our Kaduna Network Center, to get some more views, particularly as will have an impact or likely impact on the subnational governments. Back again to our studios. Mr. Nana, again, let's now begin to break it down in terms of specifics with regard to Nigeria's representation. Yes, there have been rave reviews, as indicated by our guests here who've commented on Nigeria's outing. So we've participated in this year's spring meeting. The question will be, so what? Which of our policy options, gained most traction, if you ask me, if you like, rather, with the influential groups that we had interactions with, from your perspective?
Yeah, first of all, like was said earlier on, the good thing is that we went to the meetings with a plan, unlike the last attendance that we had. So that was good. And it was well received across the world. But then again, there were also comments around that plan, around which we should also be very careful and very prudent about. Before I go to those comments around the plan, the major takeaways that I believe that Nigeria put forward to the world, there was this talk about illicit capital flows. There was this talk about recovery of assets that are in the West. So that was really pushed forward by the Minister of Finance. But then again, there was also a push towards more funding for power sector, more funding for the housing sector and water in particular. Before the summit, or before the meetings, we had this power sector recovery program that the World Bank had committed to put money down on, with timelines Unfortunately, a few of those timelines are not being met, but we hope that there could be adjustments along the way. They've committed to $2.5 billion in World Bank support, $1.3 billion of IFC investment in the power sector, and $1.2 billion of MEGA guarantees. So these were the baskets that Nigeria took to the World Bank and requested support, in addition to the family housing scheme that they talked about. Now, after all that, of course, like I said, there were the meetings also signaled a few steps that Nigeria needs to also look at. Of course, the IMF will always talk about foreign exchange management. There are still concerns about the way our foreign exchange regime is being managed in Nigeria. They still believe that we should have data. We are actually not doing very badly in non-oil revenue, and the projections are also looking very good. In fact, the projections up to 2022 suggest that at some point we'll begin to raise more revenue from non-oil than even from oil. So the projections look good. But in access to finance, the World Bank itself has also committed to $1.3 billion to the Development Bank of Nigeria, which is designed to provide medium to long-term financing for SMEs. And the impact of that, growing the SME sector on tax revenues, can also not be overemphasized. So to that extent, the World Bank has come up to say, we are not just talking, we are prepared to act, but you also have to do your part.
Talking about those within the tax net, the Minister of Finance, in a presentation in Lagos yesterday, did say that only about 214 Nigerians pay tax of up to 20 million annually, looking at the number of billionaires we have and trillionaires we have. Is this very healthy?
It's not healthy. It's not healthy. But I think the approach by the Inland Revenue Service, led by Mr. Fowler first, is to ensure that those within the net are paying what they're supposed to pay. And I also understand that they are going through a series of reforms. There was a time they gave some incentives, they gave some holidays for those who are outside the net to come in and then have some taxes forgiven. And so to that extent, they haven't done that badly in that.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Nana. Professor Kenifit, back to you. With regard to, of course, we know what the role of the World Bank is in economic development, and then what, of course, the role of the IMF is in terms of the financial system. Now, let's narrow it down. We know what our major challenges are with regard, to our economic situation. Infrastructural deficit, housing deficit, as well as, of course, the ultimate one being power. From what has happened at the spring meeting of the World Bank and the IMF, as well as the various, guarantees, not necessarily guarantees now, various approvals or proposals, to assist us. Are we well on track? What do we need to do in terms of our counterpart policies and real action in order to attract these propositions by the IMF, by the World Bank?
As a matter of fact, I think we are on track, actually. We couldn't be celebrating the big allocation to IDA if we didn't do our plan, the economic recovery, because that was the precondition before the World Bank and ADB could open up and really give us the money that we need. And I'm glad we have that plan. And the plan speaks to the key issues that have been raised even within the spring meeting. We thought that the first, of course, is macroeconomic stability, the first key objective. And that is squarely within the ambit of the CBN. And as you know, CBN has been fighting alone for 2 years. So it's going to get a respite. And I think all the elements portend good thing. But the second one, of course, is the agricultural transformation, which again you can see heavy support coming, and we're getting good results. We got 5% growth rate in the last quarter from agriculture, and we think there's more coming in that area, with the likes of Dangote putting a lot of money, and then you have Olam. There are many people going in, and even the CBN's anchor program is now being celebrated because it's a very inclusive program, quite different from all the other programs that they've had in the past. Then power, of course, is at the heart of it, because not only that we are talking about power generation, we're also looking at energy. Petroleum is there, so you could see some action likely to take place in reducing our exposure to import of refined products. So there will be a lot more resources going in there. And 75 private refineries, and of course Dangote will bring in extra capacity of 650,000 barrels. Then you have diversification, which is the fourth area. And when you look at the objective, that the key vision that says sustainable what? Sustainable diversification and inclusive what? Social and economic inclusion. You could see how all that have been disaggregated.
That's right. Professor Ken, another point again that Nana Ode was talking about, namely, we have all of this, but all of this, will have to function within, our own policy framework. And one of the most important policy frameworks that we have on an annual basis is the Appropriation Act. Today is the 2nd of May, and the budget, of course, elapses on the 6th of May. What do we need to do to get it right? Because all the issues, the breakdown, the decomposition of those plans and programs are to be found in the Appropriation Act.
Predicated on the budget.
Yes.
Look, there have been two areas of tension, and I've not ceased to talk about this for years on networks. First is, what is the extent to which the National Assembly can deconstruct a federal budget? And it's very simple. This is a constitutional matter. Both parties should just approach the Supreme Court to give a view. It's a recurring tension, and there's nothing wrong. It's not animosity. The second one, of course, is when will the federal government oblige the National Assembly with a monitoring report on budget? That is consistent with their oversight function. They want monthly, and I don't think monthly report is reasonable. The quarterly report is much more appropriate. Give them a quarterly return on the spend, both spend on budget and spend on external monies coming in, so that they have 3 opportunities of coming to look at do their oversight. So that by the time your budget arrives in November, early December, they would have done 3 oversights visits, and there will be no reason for them to hold our budget for 5 months scrutinizing budget, because you need to see the level of scrutiny. Some of them actually want to see invoice and then go and check, do the Google on their thing to see who is supplying and how much price. They go into that level. So you've got to oblige them 3 opportunities to come and do their oversight, so that when the budget arrives in November, there will be absolutely no excuse. And I have written, even when Jonathan was there, I wrote to Jonathan, I wrote to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I wrote to Senate President. I've been writing to them, please, that's the minimum we should expect,
Okay, Professor Ken, I know that you're already on fire, and we'd like to bring in a former governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Tunde Lemo, because we're talking about something that concerns a policy that should drive the programs we have to ensure that we recover quickly from the recession and put our economy on the path of growth. You had the comments of the IMF on floating the naira, and today we're talking about the budget, but we dwell on the budget now. We just have a few days to the expiration of what one would say is the overlap of the 2016 budget. What is your take and the implications of this on the nation's economy?
Thank you very much. First is to say that, yes, we have made progress in the last few months because the rates appear to be stabilizing. However, we need to move away from multiple foreign exchange rates so that we can have a harmony. Any divergence of more than 5% between the official rate and any other rate is deemed by our development partners to be multiple foreign exchange practices. And this is why we don't yet have confidence that is required to bring in much needed inflow of foreign exchange that will stabilize not just the economy and foreign exchange market, but also the capital market. Remember that 3-4 years ago, the capital market was 62% dominated by the foreign investors. They moved away because Forex became something they couldn't have a handle on. So even with the progress that central bank has made, there's a need for harmony. And that is what will power the recovery that we expect going forward.
All right, I'll just stay with you, Mr. Tunde Lemo. One other point that we will need to trash out. Yes, we'll be talking about recession, and we've all seen the efforts by the central bank, to intervene in the forex market, and so on and so forth. Is there a sense in which we have not, as economic managers, tended to focus on that critical sector? Mr. Ude was talking about it a moment ago, watching, the financial institution, especially the banks, and then seeing how we might stave off whatever late knock-on effects there might be as a result of the recession that we've had for about a year now.
If you can come again, please.
Mr. Lamoka, if you can hear me clearly now, I'm saying that there is a sense in which there's an appreciation of what the central bank has tried to do with regard to managing, our forex regime in the light of the recession that we've had. But that Mr. Nana Ude also talked about one of the, critical points arising from the spring meeting of the World Bank and IMF, namely how to monitor very closely financial institutions, especially banks in Nigeria. Is it now time, in your opinion, for us to focus on seeing exactly what the impact of recession has been on the Nigerian banks?
Lost you again, but definitely, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what you meant because the volume is not very clear. Perhaps a fault from the studio. But what I was trying to say is that there must be confidence, and confidence from foreign investors means that there must be clarity about the direction of foreign exchange. It doesn't really matter if there is a depreciation, but at least something to anchor expectation. A situation whereby we have about 3, 4, 5 rates may not augur well for development. And much has been done recently by central bank in the last 3 months, but there's a need for harmony. We need to harmonize all these rates so as to anchor expectation and then be able to assist investors in the way to go forward.
Well, again, let's see if we let me repeat my question, and perhaps we can clear up the audio snag at this time. I'm saying that in the light of the fact that where there are positive comments with regard to Nigeria getting out of recession maybe in the coming months, is this now time for us to focus, particularly for the economic and financial managers, to focus on what the impact of the recession has been on Nigerian banks? Because sometimes you can have a delayed effect that could cause some problems going forward. What is your view on this?
The last bit, what is my view on something going forward? That is all I had. I wish I could hear you clearly.
Well, Mr. Lebo, don't bother. We have other guests with us here in the studios. We're sorry about the snag, but let's Professor Kennife, let's begin with you. Perhaps if he then listens to the comment that you make, he might be able to get on. In other words, look, the central bank has obviously, it has a good oversight. It has oversight legally over the financial system, including the banks and so on and so forth. But what we have had on a more regular basis has been with forex management. Now, arising from the IMF and World Bank meetings, look, there's an indication that watch out for your banks. So is this now time for us to now actually turn the searchlight and then see whether there might be any delayed impact of the recession of the banking sector?
I would say it's premature. Why? Because you remember in 2008, when we had the problem, Sanusi set up the AMCON, and we poured in 5 trillion to rescue the banks. And they went to the extent of even buying performing loans. So this particular time round, one, that we don't have the money. And two, we have far more serious challenges right now in rescuing many parts of the economy. We are just happen to be lucky that there is a sudden inflow because of the marginal rise in the price of crude. And then CBN has returned, fighting back seriously. So we understand that. But we still have to attack the demand side of Forex. because the gap is still there. You couldn't be earning just under $2 billion a month, and then you are facing an import bill of $4.6 billion. There's still a gap is there. And if the oil price drops by any means, or even hostilities resume in the Niger Delta, we're going to be back to square one. So we've got to deal with the demand side of Forex. And the plan gives us the opportunity to do that. The economic recovery plan gives us the opportunity to do that because it brought all the players on the table, and it has matching orders for CBN on credit, a rising credit to the private sector from 10% to 19.9%, a declining credit to the public sector from 14% down to 10%. So you can actually see how it is going to drive the fundamental change that we want to see in the economy, so that we can actually, CBN can comfortably sit on top of these matters. Now, in terms of the banks, it is their overexposure to the oil and gas sector that created this problem. Apart from, look at how many times CBN has tried to nudge the banks to increase lending to the private sector. At the outset of TSA, the TSA, they complained of liquidity, and CBN responded by pouring 1.5 trillion to the banks. Then again, they did more, but asking them to lend to the real sector, and they didn't. So CBN now had to come back again to increase the NPA. So that tension is there. But the fundamental lesson that we have to learn in the banking sector is that you take money from depositors and give them a meager 3 to 5% deposit, and then go and charge over 25% to those who you should package the money and lend to produce for the economy. Now, I don't know what kind of economist is that. You take from me, and then you take from the government for nothing, and then take, you got to get that right.
Yes. Thank you, Prof. You've really made a very valid point there, your analysis on the gap and what needs to be done going forward. I think we'll get more perspective from Kaduna, where we have the Commissioner for Budget and Planning in Kaduna State, who was also at the World Bank IMF spring meetings, and by his own right, an economist. So looking at the position here, CBN no doubt has continued to conduct due diligence over Nigerian banks, and we've been in recession for this period. Is there a possible fallback or effect on the status of these banks, looking at the issues that are rising from the operations?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think that, in terms of management, states are really not in line or in tune with managing monetary policy. That's the exclusive preserve of the federal government and the central bank and its agencies. And I think that instead I would like to focus a bit more on something that the panel discussed a bit earlier, which was the passage of the federal government budget, or the non-passage of the FG budget as of May in 2017. And just to mention that we at the states are quite concerned around this development or lack of it. I think the president submitted the budget in December last year. This has been about almost 6 months now. Nigerians have been keenly awaiting the passage of the budget. And for us, it's important because the federal government budget catalyzes state spending and creates better jobs at the state level. If we do not have this capital injection from the federal government, it becomes a bit more difficult for the states to continue to deliver development across the spectrum of its mandates. And so I think that it's a very important point that we really need to probably have a full discussion on and appeal once again to the National Assembly, possibly for a suspension of all of the activity to ensure that this is given top priority, that it passes. Because based on our own experience in managing a small state like Kaduna, even if the budget is passed this week, the issues that you would have around procurement, for example, if you're doing large-scale infrastructure projects, takes nothing less than 2 months or 3. We're talking about going into August before some of the jobs that you would see would get awarded, jobs that are contained in the 2017 budget. So I think it's an important enough topic for us to probably have a full-scale discussion on, and I just wanted to re-highlight that. With regards to the last World Bank meeting, I just wanted to re-emphasize as well the renewed importance that's been given to the Sustainable Development Goals and the World Bank's two themes of ending poverty and shared prosperity. I think that it's important that as we implement our projects, that these are in the front and center. And Nigeria has been able to really put those at the heart of its economic recovery and growth plan. And we are going to the high-level political forum at the United Nations in July, where the MDG office of the federal government has already put together a very strong presentation around Nigeria and the SDGs. So just to mention again that Nigeria has been commended fully for being now on top of really the global agenda, and we're hoping very soon that it gets actualized, but it can only get actualized if issues like the budget are passed on time and Nigeria begins to deliver to its broad spectrum of people.
All right, thank you very much there,
Clorets chewing gum neutralizes bad odor. It doesn't just disguise them, it gives you real minty breath.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSE, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on NTA, Nigerian Television Authority, the biggest television network in Africa. And we're discussing the fallout of the World Bank IMF spring meeting that took place in Washington, D.C. And we have other Nigerians joining us via our Twitter handle, NTA.ng. And of course, we have inroad here with Dele Jackson Solomon writing in here, my moderators, clear and effective communication of policy stances will be key to limit excessive market volatility and negative spillovers. Kingsley.
And then, yeah, we have another tweet here from one of our regulars. It says, that's Sani Bakala Makoji, posing a question. What does the USA agitation or prayer to remove the phrase free trade from IMF's agenda suggest to us?
And Mike Anyakwo writes in spring meeting should be a driver for tailored, prioritized and sequenced structural reforms, safeguarding financial stability.
And Innocent Yawa James tweets, Nigeria should only tap what will be of importance to us and design a great framework to get us on the right track to economic growth.
And of course we have Festus Akimboya says, IMF World Bank meetings is good, but we can't trust IMF World Bank, whose hypocrisy against developing economies like Nigeria is escalating.
And then Desmond James tweets, how can we improve our economy when there's no budget?
Well, I think we move on there. We'll have to get your comments now. First, let's go to Tunde Lemo. I'm sure he's hearing us now because we're talking about a budget in the 5th month of the year, promising 30%, to develop our infrastructure and 70% on the other side to take care of salaries and other overheads. What is your take? This is the 5th month of the year. With all the policies, with all the breakthroughs made at the World Bank spring meeting, how can we begin to benefit from it with the budget 2017 still, going through scrutiny?
Again, I come back to one of the things that was mentioned in the IMF Article 4 consultation with Nigeria, which is that we need to front load what we call fiscal consolidation. A situation whereby a very tiny percentage of our budget goes into capital expenditure does not augur well for growth and development. We need fiscal restraint, particularly at sub-national level, state and local government level. This idea of thinking that we can fix infrastructure only by borrowing is simply not sustainable. Over 30% of our revenue now goes into debt service. And if care is not taken, it will climb up to 50% going forward if we continue to borrow. We must free up, we must make our economy such that will attract foreign investment into infrastructure. All over the globe now, infrastructure is not developed through government budget. It's developed by attracting capital globally to fix express roads, to do world-class ports, and so on and so forth. And that is what we should do. First, to reduce capital expenditure by even reducing the burden of governance, the size of governance. We spend too much money on frivolities, and that we must rein in. A minimum of 50% should go into capital expenditure. Even if we need to retrench, even if we need to, what I mean retrenchment, not retrenchment of workers, but retrenchment of the political class and the infrastructure that we have that does not give much, put much on the table. I mean, federal government in U.S., how many senators do they have? How many congressmen do they have? Given the size of their economy, aren't we thinking that we need we need some consolidation if we must free up resources for development?
There's something interesting. The Minister of Finance, in a presentation yesterday, did announce to Nigerians that about 64 billion naira was spent just on tours by the federal government within a given period. Well, only 19 billion was provided for infrastructure development. What does that portend in our economy?
Well, that's a pertinent question. But at the same time, the federal government has been working to slash, the cost of local tours and travel, the so-called cost of governance. If you say, they're arranging tickets, discounted tickets with specific airlines and so on and so forth, cutting down on number of meetings, by committees, and therefore the allowances that the committee members.
So the efficiency unit is really working along that line. And even the Presidential Enabling Environment Business Council, Business Environment Council is all working. That's right. So let's get Nana to come in here.
Okay. Yeah, I want to have a bit of a conversation around the budget, because, like we have all pointed out, it is the anchor for our navigating through our economic recession. We can have a cosmetic approach to addressing budget issues, i.e., continue to lay emphasis on how much percentage should go on current and capital and all that. But we still have a fundamental challenge in the process. Professor Ken Ife made a good point about what should be done in terms of quarterly reviews of past appropriations, so that you don't spend all the time looking at it when it comes. But over and above that, in many developed countries and emerging economies, where it is settled that the legislature has a role to play in the appropriation process, the legislature is fully equipped to play that role. Now, we have a situation here where we rely on senators and honorable members to do the review of the budget. I can tell you for free that there are not more than 5% of them that will have even a basic understanding of how to manage that process. So we had been advocating from the NESG point of view for the establishment of the National Assembly Budget and Research Office. If we have such an office in the National Assembly with trained economists, budget economists and all that.
That's been done now.
No, it's not fully effective as it should be, because if you have such an office, then it will have a year-to-year conversation with the executive on the appropriation. So when it comes, you don't now have to shut down the entire process until it is convenient. When senators go on Easter break, then everything stops. When they go on their recess, everything stops. So we need to begin to look at those deeper approaches. Then a point made by Mr. Lemo around relying on the appropriation to fund capital. Again, we need to address that. Fortunately, this particular National Assembly, working with NESG, we have reviewed a lot of the economic reform laws, especially those in the infrastructure sector, to remove all impediments, legal impediments, to allowing private sector participation. Once we're able to achieve that, and we can unlock foreign investment into the infrastructure sector, then you will begin to see that we have somewhat address the challenge of how much we're allocating to capital, how much is even available to allocate capital, and whether those funds are tied to any particular governmental process that is either weak or that is failing.
Well, so the point you just raised now is interesting and important as well. I recall that this was one of the issues we discussed last year on this program, and the Senate itself, had some sessions, and they identified some 18 pieces of legislation.
We're talking about the integrity of Nigerian banks, the impact of recession on these banks, and their exposure, to bad debt and all that. What is your view?
Recession where? The impact of recession. You said, what is my view on the impact of recession where?
On the banks, on the banks.
On Nigerian banks,
The financial system.
The impact of recession on Nigerians' lives, for me, this period that we've been through has taught us hard lessons.
Figures as to there are early warning signals, and they made that point that the Nigerian monetary policy authorities should, and the regulatory authorities should put a searchlight on the financial system.
Okay, from there, let's go to Kaduna, where we have the Commissioner for Budget and Planning, Mohammed Sani Abdullahi. We look at another area now, that of talking about a productive and inclusive growth, an economy that is driven by production, and we have
possible ease the business environment and ensure that there's investment into the core sectors of the state economy. And that is how we have essentially targeted this. The role of the government would be limited to creating sort of large sector public works in terms of infrastructure that absorb a lot of the young people and building capacity for people to be able to take up the jobs that are required. Over the last 2 years, I think, Kaduna State at least has done a number of interventions in this area. We just finished our investment summit where we've raised over $450 million from the private sector, where they have invested in manufacturing concerns that would raise a number of jobs in the state. These are all works in the pipeline. We're still working very hard with a number of our partners to ensure that we can bring in the jobs. But these jobs are also affected by the state of the economy, both at the federal and the global level. And that is why we remain concerned around what is happening in these meetings that we talked about today, and in the direction and thrust of the federal government and also our sister states. All these matter when you're creating jobs at the state level. We continue to push for it. It's been difficult, especially at a time of declining resources, but we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll continue to push for this, God willing.
Okay, Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, we thank you so much. We still
have more than twice the demand for forex than what you have. And then secondly, you've issued 18 licenses for cars to be assembled in your country, and 400,000 cars are coming in from Cotonou, and 200,000 being imported. You have, and they're all being smuggled, and you're beating your tax regime. The WTO allows you to have safeguard measures. You have to invoke safeguard measures to protect your economy. And secondly, infant industry protection is done by everybody in the world, not one person. But the thing is, the only area where we have issues is that we have to consult. We have to have public interest justification. And then we have to have reasonable interval between enactment and going into force. Those are the only three areas where Nigeria has problems. But in terms of the measures, we have to safeguard our economy.
I agree with consult with whom?
No, consultation with the value chain, the players. And not just do it on one person's, for one person. No, they have to be public interest.
We can take the micro industries now.
All right, the micro, I'm sorry. The thing is, if you look at the new policy framework, it actually goes, the fifth one actually addresses the MSMEs in terms of diversification, because that is really where the priority has to come on diversification. Because the numbers you have given, 94% of the businesses, 90% of the employment, and the 48% of the GDP, nominal GDP, is all coming from that sector, and yet the access to finance is abysmal. So
of them from where you can grow them from MSMEs, ICT, agro-processing and all that. So those have actually been identified, and then what we are trying to do now, working again with the government, is targeted policies, and more importantly, like he said, access to finance. Right now, we have a bill on secure transactions in movable assets to enable MSMEs to access credit using their movable assets. We're also working on independent warehouse regulatory, so you can use your warehouse receipts to also access finance. So when all of these are in place, then the real MSMEs that add value to the economy will then step up and begin to take advantage of those legislations or those policies. But right now, yes, an articulation of that is happening, and we're actually beginning to separate the sand from the substance, so to say.
Okay. Maybe I can all right, I just wanted, Sani Abdullahi, what's your take on this? Because when you hear MSMEs, MSMEs, we're just wondering what their real contribution is, in terms of value addition, in terms of job creation, sustainable job creation, as well as gradual expansion of their businesses.
With the MSME issue, there's really been a dislocation, if you might say, around the formulation of the policy around MSME. It's so far trained about 3,000 young people around different businesses. We partnered with the Kaduna Business School. And at the end of the day, they are able to collect up to 10 million naira in financing from the Bank of Industry and some funds that we've made available. Now that's been a lot, so we've seen a lot of changes in terms of, for you to be able to access it, you have to go through a 10-week program that builds capacity. Now, for the people that are willing to do this and that excel in the program, they are then able to access the finance. And this is very different from when you just open up a fund and say, here's 10 million, apply, and then half of the cousins and the brothers of the people that are managing these resources are the people that benefit. So this is essentially part of the issues. So I think we need to look at it more holistically. I'm glad that there is something like that going on at the federal government level. There was something before, but it was misused at the end of the day. But I think that if we can cohere around proper formulation of it and implementation around people that actually deserve these resources, then we'd see some progress.
Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, the Commissioner for Budget and Planning in Kaduna State. We thank you for your perspectives on this very conversation. Follows from the World Bank, IMF spring meetings. We thank you so much. All right. We come back to the studio. We'll go to Professor Ken. If the issue now is talking about the role the micro, small, and medium enterprises could play, looking at their capacity, looking at their inability to really, build their business. The various intervention funds that have been put in place, the 220 billion naira and other funds by the Bank of Industry. On a last take, what is the way forward?
The thing is that two farmers at their level of production, as outgrowers. So you can actually have the likes of ShopRite working with 10,000 farmers.
Professor Ken.
Yeah, you have, so that's a new dimension.
All right. I just wondered, Nana, at the beginning, when you were giving an overview of the outcome of the spring meeting, you said what was not said was as crucial as what was revealed. From your perspective, what are those things that were not said that we should worry about? Brexit is still an issue. You have the second round of the election coming up in France, in a matter of days, and then the German election is also in the corner. France and Germany and the UK and Britain, of course, these are the big economic powers in Europe. Plus, of course, the Trump issue.
The global
Just 30 seconds.
Yes, I know. The global economic landscape is still evolving, definitely. And the good thing is that the global governance institutions are aware of it and are deploying the right instruments to monitor what's happening. But about what's not being said as we localize it to Nigeria, I think in all of this that we have said, signaling from the presidency is key. I mean, even in order for us to get to the point where we had in recession, with the recession, the right signaling, a pragmatic approach to managing the Niger Delta situation enabled us increase crude oil production and then take advantage of rising crude prices. And so signaling from the presidency and the executive is very important.
Thank you very much, Nana Ode, of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, for your perspective.
First African ever to be crowned World Scrabble champion when he defeated England's Louis Mackay in 4 straight sets. National Scrabble team captain Cyril Umebie relieves the moment.
We abandoned our games. We carried him up. Even our friend that was playing for England, that's Mr. Femi Awa, they forgot he was playing for England because he was a Nigerian. He was the one singing, we don't win, we don't win. It was so funny. And the British people were like, I thought Femi was playing for us.
Despite this feat, which has brought glory to the country, the game of Scrabble